There comes a point when you realize your life has become strangely crowded, not with people, but with their opinions. You catch yourself choosing your words more carefully than your values, questioning decisions that once felt right, replaying ordinary moments long after they have passed. A brief glance from someone else unsettles your confidence, while a few words of praise seem enough to restore it. Little by little, your peace stops belonging to you and begins depending on reactions you were never meant to control. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world existed. They believed that the moment your inner calm is governed by external approval, you quietly surrender the only freedom that truly belongs to you. Stoicism was never about escaping the world. It was about reclaiming lasting peace through the discipline of your own mind. Most people spend years believing they are searching for confidence, when in reality they are searching for permission to speak honestly, to live differently, and to stop measuring themselves against expectations they never consciously chose. Yet the freedom they seek has never been waiting in the approval of the crowd. Most people move through life believing every important decision comes from their own independent mind. Yet the moment you slow down long enough to examine those choices honestly, something surprising begins to emerge. You notice how often your decisions have been quietly shaped by expectations you never consciously accepted. The career that appeared respectable was also the one that earned admiration. Even the version of yourself that others know may have been assembled piece by piece from countless attempts to fit where acceptance felt safer than authenticity. This happens because the desire to belong is woven deeply into human nature. The Stoic philosophers observed that human suffering often begins not with external hardship, but with misplaced dependence. Our judgments, intentions, and choices remain within our influence. Reputation, praise, and the opinions of others never have. The problem arises when these two categories become confused. Little by little, we begin investing more emotional energy in what belongs to the world than in what belongs to ourselves. This rarely happens through one dramatic decision. It grows quietly through ordinary moments that appear too small to matter. You hesitate before expressing an honest opinion because disagreement feels uncomfortable. You choose the safer path instead of the meaningful one because security promises immediate approval, while uncertainty risks disappointment. None of these moments seem significant on their own, yet over months and years they accumulate until something subtle changes inside you, and the life you are living begins feeling less genuinely your own. Carl Jung believed there comes a quiet turning point when a person grows tired of always orienting themselves outward, not because they have failed, but because they have spent too long measuring themselves against the world. That exhaustion is often the first sign that something deeper is asking for attention. Instead of asking whether a choice reflects your own principles, you begin asking whether it will be accepted. Every decision invites praise from some and condemnation from others. If a person built their peace upon those reactions, their inner life would be in permanent turmoil. Returning again and again to a simple discipline becomes necessary. Judge your actions by whether they are just, honest, and consistent with reason, not by whether they satisfy every observer. That lesson remains remarkably relevant because the world has only become louder, making it increasingly tempting to substitute public approval for private conviction. The difficulty is that approval produces a powerful emotional reward. The mind quickly learns to associate recognition with safety. A compliment provides relief. Positive feedback creates certainty, and being accepted temporarily quiets persistent self-doubt. Modern psychology explains that human beings naturally seek social acceptance because, for much of history, belonging increased the chances of survival. The brain still carries those ancient patterns, even though the dangers have changed. Today, rejection is rarely life-threatening, yet the nervous system often reacts as though it were. Over time, this creates a subtle dependency. Confidence no longer grows from character, but from confirmation. Success feels real only after someone notices it. Good work seems valuable only after receiving recognition. There is an important difference between appreciating encouragement and requiring it. One strengthens effort, while the other quietly transfers authority over your emotional life into hands that cannot consistently protect it. The Stoics challenged this pattern by asking a remarkably simple question. What part of your peace have you entrusted to circumstances beyond your control? The answer is rarely comfortable because it reveals how much invisible power we have given away. Every time your mood depends entirely on another person's approval, you have allowed them to influence something that belongs only to you. The solution is not to reject people or ignore relationships, but to place them in their proper position. Appreciation can enrich life without becoming the foundation upon which life stands. This realization shifts your attention away from controlling the world and back toward governing yourself. Some people will misunderstand your intentions no matter how carefully you explain them. None of that needs to determine the direction of your life. The moment you stop borrowing certainty from strangers, your choices become less reactive, your values become clearer, and lasting confidence finally begins emerging from within. That realization leads to a question most people spend years avoiding. If so much of your life has been shaped by expectations and silent compromises, then who has really been making your choices? More often, it is the version of yourself that slowly learned how to earn acceptance. It speaks carefully, behaves appropriately, avoids unnecessary risks, and constantly measures whether it is fitting into the world around it. At first, this seems like maturity, but over time something begins feeling strangely distant. You accomplish what you thought you wanted, yet the satisfaction never lasts. Wisdom begins when you recognize that your character exists before every title and remains after every title disappears. Without noticing it, the role becomes more important than the person behind it. Society rarely encourages this distinction. From an early age, people are praised for what they achieve rather than who they genuinely are, gradually tying identity to performance rather than principle. This process unfolds so naturally that almost nobody questions it. As children, we quickly learn which behaviors earn approval and which invite criticism. We discover that being agreeable often receives more encouragement than being honest, and that success attracts attention in ways character often does not. Slowly, the mind begins making small adjustments. Certain opinions remain unspoken, certain emotions stay hidden, and certain dreams are abandoned before they are fully understood. There is an important difference between behaving appropriately and becoming dependent upon appearing acceptable. One reflects wisdom, the other quietly replaces it. When every action is filtered through the question of how it will be received, inner guidance gradually grows silent. Eventually, the effort required to maintain that carefully constructed image becomes exhausting. Every conversation demands attention, every mistake feels dangerous, and every unfamiliar situation threatens to expose something imperfect beneath the surface. Energy that could have been spent understanding yourself is redirected toward protecting an identity requiring constant maintenance. Carl Jung believed the social mask was not a flaw, but a necessary part of life. He called it the persona, the face we present to the world so we can belong and fulfill our roles. The danger begins when we forget it is only a role and start believing it is who we truly are. Years pass, success arrives, responsibilities increase, and others describe you as accomplished and admirable. Yet in quiet moments when no performance is required, an unfamiliar emptiness begins to appear. Modern psychology speaks about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. One grows from personal meaning, while the other depends upon external rewards. When actions arise primarily from external validation, satisfaction fades quickly because another reward is always required. The Stoics reached a similar conclusion centuries earlier. Lasting stability can only emerge when action is guided by reason and character rather than by applause or reputation. External rewards may come and go, but they cannot provide a foundation sturdy enough to support the entire weight of identity. Perhaps this is why comparison carries such a quiet weight. The pain rarely comes from another person's success itself. It comes from the subtle belief that their progress somehow exposes your lack of it. Without realizing it, you stop seeing another life as simply different and begin treating it as the standard by which your own life should be measured. Before long, your attention drifts away from your own direction and settles on a race you never consciously agreed to enter. Carl Jung believed this is the moment a person begins denying their own individual path. Every life unfolds according to its own rhythm of growth, and the moment you measure your journey against someone else's, you quietly abandon the process of becoming who only you can become. The Stoic perspective is remarkably simple. Your task is not to live another person's destiny more successfully than they do. Your task is to fulfill your own with honesty and discipline, regardless of whether anyone else notices. The challenge is that the modern world rarely encourages this way of thinking. Social media presents carefully selected moments that appear complete while hiding the uncertainty that produced them. You are comparing your private struggles to someone else's public victories. Once comparison begins, contentment quietly disappears. Whatever you have accomplished starts feeling smaller because someone else appears to have accomplished more. Consider two travelers walking separate mountain paths. One climbs steadily, appreciating each step while remaining focused on the trail beneath their feet. The other spends the entire journey looking sideways, wondering whether someone on another mountain has climbed higher or faster. Eventually, exhaustion arrives, not because the climb was too difficult, but because attention was divided between two paths instead of one. Life often unfolds the same way. Energy follows attention, and wherever attention constantly wanders, peace quietly leaves behind. This is precisely why Stoicism places such emphasis on governing perception before attempting to govern circumstances. Comparison gradually disconnects you from your natural rhythm. Every meaningful pursuit requires seasons. There are times for learning, times for struggle, times for visible progress, and times when nothing seems to happen at all. These quieter periods often produce the deepest transformation because they strengthen qualities that cannot be measured externally. Yet comparison makes these seasons feel like failure because they do not resemble someone else's visible success. The Stoics consistently returned to a simple discipline whenever the mind drifted toward distraction. Bring attention back to what belongs to you. Your effort belongs to you. Your character belongs to you. Your judgments belong to you. Another person's achievements never have. As this understanding settles more deeply, the pressure to keep pace slowly loses its influence. You stop measuring every chapter of your life against someone else's timeline and begin paying closer attention to the person you are becoming through your own experiences, allowing you to move forward with steadiness instead of constant comparison. Carl Jung believed we often project our own hidden self-judgments onto the people around us, imagining criticism that originates less in their minds than in our own. The remarkable thing is that most people are far too occupied with their own concerns to evaluate you nearly as often as you imagine. The invisible audience that feels so real is often nothing more than your own attention turned inward in the harshest possible way. Modern psychology describes something remarkably similar through the idea of cognitive schemas. Each person develops deeply rooted beliefs about themselves, often formed through years of repeated experiences. The mind does not simply observe reality. It filters reality according to expectations that already exist beneath conscious awareness. The Stoics encouraged a practice that remains surprisingly effective today. Instead of immediately believing every emotional reaction, pause long enough to examine the judgment beneath it. Between the event and your response exists a small space where reason can quietly intervene. It is within that space that genuine freedom begins to grow. A quiet mind learns the difference between observation and reaction. Instead of chasing every impulse, it begins watching them pass with patience. That small shift changes everything because it interrupts habits that once operated automatically. As your relationship with yourself becomes stronger, discipline begins to take on an entirely different meaning. You no longer act because you are afraid of being judged if you fail. You act because your choices have become aligned with the kind of person you genuinely wish to become. The effort remains, but the emotional weight begins to disappear. The Stoics believed that the most important victories usually happen where no audience exists. Choosing patience instead of anger during an ordinary inconvenience, remaining honest when dishonesty would be easier, finishing a responsibility even though nobody would notice if you stopped. Character grows quietly because its roots develop long before its results become visible, and those unseen roots determine whether the tree survives every difficult season. Motivation alone can never sustain meaningful growth. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls according to circumstances, mood, and external encouragement. A disciplined life grows from decisions guided by principles rather than temporary feelings. An interesting shift also takes place in the way success is measured. As your perspective matures, another question gradually becomes more important. Did I remain faithful to my principles today? That question changes everything because it returns responsibility to something entirely within your influence. Carl Jung believed there comes a profound turning point when a person stops being pulled outward by the world and begins building a disciplined inner life, no longer driven by recognition but by an inner necessity to live in alignment with what is true. In that state, the need for external recognition naturally begins to fade. The opinions of others still exist, but they no longer govern your direction, leaving only the steady guidance of your own conscience as your wisest companion. One of the most beautiful consequences of this change is the quiet freedom it creates in relationships. When your worth no longer depends upon constant approval, you stop asking other people to carry responsibilities that never belonged to them. Appreciation replaces dependence. Gratitude replaces desperation. You can enjoy encouragement without requiring it for survival. You can listen to criticism without immediately becoming defensive. You begin seeing people as fellow travelers rather than judges assigned to evaluate your existence. Failure also begins to lose its frightening reputation. It no longer appears as evidence that you are inadequate. Instead, it becomes part of the education every meaningful life requires. Seneca observed that difficulties are not sent to destroy character, but to strengthen it, much like resistance strengthens a muscle. Without challenge, courage remains theoretical. Without disappointment, patience rarely develops. Seen through this perspective, obstacles stop appearing as interruptions to the journey and begin revealing themselves as essential parts of it. There is one attachment that often remains even after comparison has quieted, and the fear of judgment no longer dominates every decision. It is the desire to control outcomes. The difficulty begins when preparation quietly transforms into expectation, and expectation slowly hardens into demand. Epictetus constantly reminded his students that there is an enormous difference between governing your actions and governing their consequences. Your effort belongs to you. Your intentions belong to you. The final outcome never fully does. The Stoics did not ask life to remove uncertainty. They asked themselves to become steady within uncertainty. Imagine an experienced sailor crossing a restless sea. The sailor cannot command the wind or calm the waves. What remains within reach is learning how to adjust the sails and navigate wisely, regardless of what the sea decides to offer. You are responsible for preparing your vessel, not for controlling the ocean. That quiet understanding gradually transforms every experience into education rather than a verdict on your worth. Modern psychology often speaks about coherence, the feeling that your thoughts, values, and actions belong together rather than pulling in opposite directions. The Stoics understood this through lived experience long before it was described in scientific language. There is remarkable strength in living a life where your private choices resemble your public ones, where integrity does not depend upon observation, and where your values remain consistent whether anyone notices or not. Meaning begins emerging from the way you meet ordinary moments. A difficult conversation handled with patience becomes meaningful. A promise kept despite inconvenience becomes meaningful. Choosing honesty when deception would have been easier becomes meaningful. Growth becomes less about reaching an imagined finish line and more about becoming slightly wiser than you were yesterday. The Stoic path does not ask you to become someone entirely different. It asks you to return to the person hidden beneath fear, comparison, and endless striving, creating a meaningful life from within, one thoughtful decision at a time.